In 2016, my mother was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, a chronic disease in which the body's immune system attacks its tissue, mainly in the joints. Although a diagnosis of this nature is fairly common, my mom, a veterinary technician by occupation, is always using her hands in her everyday work. It was no doubt that if nothing was done to combat this autoimmune response, motion in the hands would grow unbearably painful and ultimately non-existent. Even after a number of oral prescriptions, nothing proved to be promising until the doctors suggested injections of Humira. And yes, Humira, the one advertised on TV, is having extraordinary powers against the attacks of arthritis. After looking into the medication a bit further, however, the retail price of the injection was one of the not so extraordinary side effects that advertisements never seem to disclose. At minimum, a single month of Humira stacked up to around $5,000. $5,000 that we do every month for the rest of her life to make it bearable to move her hands. This is not only the case with Humira, but also in other medications that prove to be life-saving. EpiPens, with the ability to combat anaphylaxis in the case of an allergic reaction, stack up to a cost of around $700 per pen. According to data collected by the National Health Council, around 40% of Americans have been diagnosed with a chronic illness, often leaving many without the medicine that they need to cope with their condition. The issue facing society today is that Big Pharma charges astronomical prices for drugs that can be used to alter the life quality of their consumers just to benefit their own companies. By doing so, this only opens up the doors of accessibility to those who can afford the high prices. Let's begin by first cracking down on the issues caused by the ever-growing influence of the pharmaceutical industry. Then, we will break into the impacts high drug prices have had on the accessibility of life-altering medications across the country. Finally, we will mend the broken pieces of this issue by outlining some solutions to offset the financial burdens of high drug prices nationwide. Let's start by cracking into the pharmacy world to examine some problems that have arisen over the past few years. Prescribed medication has become a key factor in fighting against a vast array of medical conditions, ranging anywhere from the common colds to cancerous diseases. Over 20,000 drug products have been approved for the market on the report of the FDA in 2020, making the pharmaceutical industry a great source of income within the medical field. Such a wide variety of drugs are available as treatment to many conditions, but the usage of these drugs are often limited as a result of high prices imposed by manufacturers. The cost of prescription medication has risen to an extreme that Americans struggle to pay, leaving many without the medicine that they need to tend to their own well-being. For example, insulin is an injection that those suffering from diabetes need in order to stay alive. However, over the last few years, the cost of insulin has risen to unimaginable amounts compared to what they once were. According to the Mayo Clinic, one vial of Humalog, which used to cost $21 in 1999, cost $332 in 2019, reflecting a price increase of more than 1,000%. Recently, the companies responsible for the production of insulin have devised a scheme to only increase their own profits. For people with diabetes, having insulin on hand is a matter of life or death. They have no choice but to push insulin into their budget if they would like to stay alive. By targeting a group who needs a specific medication in order to live, the manufacturers of insulin are using the diabetes diagnosis to their advantage. In the United States, there has been little government regulation over the cost of prescription drugs, which has allowed big pharmaceutical companies to grow to greater economic powers, while their consumers strain to reach these ever-growing prices. With blatant disregard to the financial status of their consumers, such companies bring in millions of dollars of revenue each year, while those less fortunate are left to make the decision if they can take a medication with such a heavy price tag, even if this decision can make or break the rest of their lives. Now that we've established the issues within the pharmaceutical industry, we can further break into the effects these problems have created. As a result of such astronomically high cost of prescribed drugs here in the United States, the overall accessibility of life-saving medications has decreased nationwide. While there are medications on the market that can serve as treatment to possibly deadly diseases, the costs are simply too high for the majority to afford. Universal access to prescriptions does not exist because pharmaceutical companies do not take into account that the majority of society cannot pay thousands of dollars every few weeks for the medications they need to live. In contrast, foreign nations have a much more reasonable cost for medicine when compared to the United States. Data collected by the Ways and Means Committee shows that the average drug cost in America is around $466. On the contrary, in the United Kingdom, the average cost for a pharmaceutical is around $105, about a quarter that of the United States. Due to this drastic price difference, patients often seek medication outside of the country that better fits their budget. Doing so is illegal as these drugs are not approved by the FDA, but individuals are forced to break the law in order to get the pharmaceuticals they need to save their lives. In order to avoid the monopolistic industries within their own nation, people have to travel to illegally import drugs that should be made more available for the people financially incapable of spending more than $400 on a single prescription. For those left to conform to such economic treacheries in states, some are forced to ration their prescriptions to stretch longer than their prescribed periods of time. By doing so, the symptoms of their particular condition are consequently worsened, and their overall life quality begins to decrease. One patient that began to skim medication accounted, when I skim one drug, my pain symptoms increase, and if I skim the other drug, my depression symptoms increase, which stresses me out even more. Rationing serves as a dangerous way to postpone the financial burdens of filling another prescription. Even if rationing may lead to possibly deadly consequences, doing so delays the punch a certain medication puts into one's budget. In 2020, Johnson & Johnson made around $82.6 billion worldwide as presented in their full year's earnings report, an amount derived from their high product costs, making them one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the nation. The overall well-being of society is being degraded by these companies as they have marginalized the accessibility of drugs that individuals need. Diminished access to pharmaceuticals has greatly impacted the country, but what solutions can we present to make amends to this growing problem? In order to combat the growing influence of the pharmaceutical industry nationwide, the government must implement policies to make medication more accessible to all Americans. First of all, Congress needs to agree upon allowing the Department of Health and Human Services to negotiate payments from manufacturers. This is the difference that sets apart American drug prices with those of foreign nations, the ability of the government to negotiate. Enacting such a policy would mean Congress would have to come together to agree upon a change in our healthcare system to better the lives of the American people. Secondly, the American government should implement a system of importation of medication from other countries for those financially incapable of receiving the prescriptions they need. Instead of having to illegally smuggle prescriptions bought within other nations, a system of importation should be made more available for those who cannot financially justify spending more than $400 on the prescriptions that they need to survive. If our country cannot reach everyone's healthcare needs, why shouldn't we be able to legally purchase what we need from other countries? Finally, the United States should allow more generic medication brands into the market. With this, we would be able to offset the profits of large manufacturers by having biosimilar counterparts that are more affordable. With a generic market, we would be able to reduce the economic productions of large manufacturers and make drugs more accessible to everyone in the United States. Putting in place these three policies would help crack down on the power of Big Pharma and make sure everyone in America gets the prescriptions they need to stay alive. In our time today, we have cracked down on the issues caused by the ever-growing influence of the pharmaceutical industry, broken down the limited accessibility that came as a result of high drug prices, and presented three main solutions that the government should put in place towards mending these issues. Now, it is at our hands to ponder the following. At the beginning of each medical professional's careers, medical professionals are sworn to the Hippocratic Oath, which entails, "And I will never ask them for gold, but demand that they stand by this covenant in return. I also swear that if I earn fame and wealth, I will share it with my masters and my students." Through immense profits and extraordinary economic development, large pharmaceutical companies have broken this oath of medical ethics. However, if the government takes the steps necessary to counter this breach of ethical practice, America too could become a nation in which my mother would not have to work out a way to spend $5,000 on the medication she needs to function pain-free in daily life. Thank you.